Hello everyone, welcome to another edition of Hometown Heroes. I'm Mike Kenichi, and I'm honored today because we have 5 of the original, well, I should say 4, and their coach, Joe Mazzanti, 4 of the original cross-country girls runners from the team that opened up in 1987. We have Sherry St. Jakes, Lauren Anicelli, Kelly Bryan, and Heather Kovacs, and of course their coach, Joe Mazzanti. And I want to thank you all for coming on today. It's a real privilege.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So before we start, though, I talked to Muzz earlier, and he said you guys got to run a few laps before we start this interview. So get going. No,
Only a few.
But, you know, this is really cool to have you on. You know, you've seen what the cross-country team has done recently, both girls and boys. They've had a tremendous amount of success in the last 5 years. And I really think it all started when this program began in 1987. So, Coach, I'll start with you. Tell me how girls cross-country came about.
Sure. It started, Mike, back in 1987, as you said. Joe Borzelli was the girls basketball coach at the time.
Right.
And he approached me, I think it was when we were having physicals up at the high school in the summer before the 1987 school year. And he said he had his basketball players and he wanted to have them get into shape for the season. And would you put them on a training program basically to get in shape for basketball? So that's basically the first wave, the first thing that happened in terms of now at the time I was coaching, I was the assistant coach of the boys team. So
right.
One of my primary responsibilities was getting a training program for the boys team. So, you know, it wasn't that much of an increased effort to put something together for his team.
And correct me if I'm wrong, Coach, but these 4 ladies right here, running wasn't their first love. They had had other sports that they played that they were really good at, correct? I mean, we obviously know what they did in their other sports, but, you know, they all came out for the team to kind of get in shape for basketball and softball, correct?
That's exactly it, yes.
Right.
Yeah, there was no middle school team at the time. There was no track team, girls track team at the time. And obviously we'd never had a girls cross-country team. So it was basically starting to get into shape for basketball. That's right.
Right. And I know it's way back, it's hard to remember, but that first team meeting, do you remember how many girls you had in that meeting approximately?
Well, the first year in 87, there really wasn't a meeting per se. It was more of a sort of informal type of start. You know, Joe would mention so-and-so is here, and that's kind of how we got started. I think in the first couple of weeks, there were a few other girls who were running too, and they sort of dropped off after our first couple of weeks. But the original 7 stuck with it, and we ended up having 3 races that year,
right?
Which we can talk about. But that's how it started.
Right. And now, was there ever any discussion before Coach Borzelli brought it up to ever do a girls running team, or was it really never considered?
Not really. There were a few points in time in the previous 10 years where, you know, there might have been a couple of girls who would express an interest briefly in running, and a few of them would run for a week or 2.
Right.
I think going back to my freshman year in high school in 1978, there were 3 or 4 girls who actually ran in a couple of races. But it never really caught fire, never got off the ground, and that was it. It never went anywhere. So this was the first time that a team would actually be formed at some point.
Right. Now, Heather, if I'm not mistaken, you were a freshman, correct, when the program started? So, you know, you were like really, you know, the first kid that, you know, all 4 years that got to run. What was it like?
Too.
Talk about what that first year was like, and, you know, did you want to go out? Did Coach Borzelli kind of make you go out? What would you say?
I I don't think I thought much of it. I think it was just like that was part of what we were going to do. We were going to go out and run. And the only previous experience I ever had to running was in 8th grade when we had that, I don't even know what you call it. It was an end of the year kind of picnic thing. And we had a race. And
Right.
Kelly and I were like the top 2 finishers. And it was kind of fun, but that was, I think, the only bit of exposure we had to running. And so I think we all grew up together and doing sports, and it was just part of our workout and our preparation. So I really didn't think much of it, and we just went out and ran. And
Right. Now let me ask you, did you want to do it though, or were you kind of told by Coach Borzelli that he wanted you to do it to stay fresh? I mean, would you have done it if Coach Borzelli didn't talk to you
no,
about it?
probably not. Yeah, I don't think I would have gone out on my own and just said, yeah, I want to go run. No.
Right.
But, telling us it would get us in shape and understanding, basketball, playing it since we were young and how much you really need to get in shape, and that running I knew would help. So.
Right. Now, Kelly, you also were a freshman as well. And again, you kind of came out for the same reasons, correct?
Correct.
Kind of to stay fresh. And, we'll get into each one of your careers because you all did very well. But, I mean, what was your first impression? I mean, did you not want to go back? Did you want to go back after the first day? What would you say?
I did not want to go back. I'll be honest, I did not want to go back. It was brutal. The distance running, it's a little bit different running around a track a couple times and placing well at field day, I guess you would
Right.
call it. And then actually going out and practicing, it was hard. I think I ran a few feet, walked a few feet, ran a few feet, walked a few feet. I did not complete the mission.
Right.
It was a hard. It got better over time, but I know a lot of us are on the side of the road taking breaks.
Now, Lauren, let me ask you, were you in the same boat too? You came out just to stay fresh. And I mean, did you know what you were getting yourself into? Because I know when I ran track, and track is nothing like cross country. Track's a little easier. Cross country could be brutal. I mean, did you have any idea that this was going to be rough, or were you in complete shock that first day?
I wasn't too happy about it at the beginning, I'll be honest. I remember Mr. Borzelli saying it would be a great thing for you girls to stay in shape, and I said, oh, I never ran before, and all the other girls were doing it, so of course there was no doubt I was going to do it, and we all would do it because that's what we do to keep going for our sports. But I don't think any of us, especially me, knew what to expect, because as a kid thinking of running, you're just sprinting down the street, but any type of cross-country endurance was something that I had never encountered or trained for or knew the techniques of. So I really didn't know what to expect. It was like a day-by-day case type of thing.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, Sherry, I mean, we know what your softball career was like, and we'll talk about that a little too, but I mean, one thing about softball as well is I think you need to be in shape, but you don't need to be like in the type of shape per se like basketball. So, I mean, did you just do it more or less because your friends were doing it, because Coach Borzelli told you to do it, or you just wanted to try something new?
I'm always for trying something new, so I remember being enthusiastic.
Did you hate it in the beginning?
I was shocked at
Yeah.
I was shocked, I will never forget the warm-up. I thought was the day. Like
Yeah.
we ran, I think, to the dog pound and back, which was like a 2-mile almost.
It's like a 1-6,
Well, it was actually about a mile.
I think it was, it's about a mile, and so we
Yeah.
got back, and I was like, all right, we did good. And he goes, well, that's just the warm-up. I'm like, what?
Right.
I had no idea. I had no idea at all what we were getting ourselves into. Honest to God, I had no clue.
Right. Now, did you come out sophomore year or junior year?
I want to sophomore year.
Right.
Yeah, the sophomore year. Right.
Right.
Yep.
So, like I said, you four definitely were, the first group kind of started this program. Let me ask you though, I mean, did any of you at any part of the season, because you don't seem like the type that would just quit something once you start it, but was there any one of you that said, you know what, I just can't do this, I'm not a runner, I'm gonna leave?
I personally really came to love it.
Yeah.
It was completely different than any of the other team sports that I had ever participated in. And the girls that were running and our coach it was awesome. It was like a really, really great experience. I learned a lot. It was hard. I remember hyperventilating.
Oh yeah,
A lot of times I remember, learning how to breathe, running. But as far as, I never really wanted to quit. I was really like that, but that's just me. I know that there were other runners that were not, wasn't their thing, but for me, I grew to love it. It was very surprising at how much I loved, and I still love running to this day.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, Coach, taking over like a new program like that, it's not easy because, number one, you have to get them to kind of buy into what you're doing, which is not always easy to do.
Get through the warm-up.
Did you struggle? Did you struggle early on trying to, motivate them or keep them, ready each time?
Well, Mike, that first year, there wasn't a lot of pressure because we really didn't know what was going to happen. There was no preconceived notion that there would be a girls' team. It was really sort of an experiment and to see what would happen, to get in shape for basketball. And then in the back of my mind, I was thinking, well, maybe we could form a team at some point. But I didn't know early on that would happen. There was no way to tell that. But at the end of the season, that's when, and they had run a couple of races, and that's when I think I approached all of them and said, if we can get this started, would you be interested in forming a girls' team? And to a person, they all said yeah. And it wasn't the kind of thing where I felt like I pulled them along. It was something that they seemed genuinely willing to do. So that's how it started, and then we proceeded to put in the proposal to the Board of Education. We went up the chain to the school. And it was really, I don't know if I'm getting ahead of myself here a little bit, but it was really sort of a perfect storm in many ways. And by that I mean you had Joe Borzelli, who got them to start running. That had to have that. As Heather said, they probably, none of them probably would have started running if that didn't happen. You had support from the Board of Education. Nick Rizzio was the chairman of the athletic committee back then, and he couldn't have been more supportive in terms of getting the program started, and the whole board for that matter. Ray Lucarelli was the chairman at the time, the whole board. And then you had the seven girls that ran, and each of them brought something to the table. I mean, I don't think we could have scripted a better nucleus of people who had never run before, and yet were still willing to be really the glue that got the program started. So it really was a perfect storm. All those things had to happen. We look back at it now as sort of a given. It was hardly a given when we first started. But yeah.
Now, Heather, obviously, like we talked about, you're very good in your other sports, but one thing I think that really is good about cross country and track is that a girl or a boy who may not be a good basketball player, a good baseball player, a good softball player, or doesn't have the skills for it, they have cross country and track that they could always do, and it gives a kid who may not be able to find his way on the football field, the soccer field, the softball field, it gives that kid the opportunity to be a part of something and, really excel. Would you agree? Or?
Yeah, definitely. I can't say that I was ever a superstar in any of the sports I was in. I just loved sports. I grew up and we didn't have a fall sport and we didn't have many options. We had basketball and softball. That's what we all played. And so cross country is like, oh, hey, another sport. And cross country is good because, like you said, it's more personal, where you kind of push yourself to do your best. And I knew I wasn't a very natural runner.
Right.
I discovered I had asthma. I always had back and hip issues. In fact, in college, I was told stop running or you're going to get your hips, have to have a hip replacement. I'm like, oh, great. So, it's just not natural for me. And, but I saw some other girls too, like Christy Froley, who wanted to quit. And I'm like, you have so much natural talent.
Yeah.
Push yourself and you can do it. And, for me, I think the biggest thing was the endurance and pushing myself to just be that better runner and just to keep pushing to the next step. And it was a good sport. I definitely learned a lot from it, and it was a great experience. And it added to the other sports because you need to run.
Yeah.
Maybe not the long distance.
Right. Now, Kelly, tell us what's the hardest part of a Muzz workout. What is the thing that you hated the most?
Running? No. I don't know, because only in the beginning I hated it, and then after a couple weeks you find your own groove, and I actually grew to love it myself because it was the one sport I could do myself but also contribute as a team member, so I can improve myself and improve the team, but it was also, you can set a bar for yourself to improve. I mean, I didn't enjoy the Saturday workouts sometimes. We had to come up here on Saturday mornings early to, get our workouts in. So that was kind of like, I don't want to get up on a Saturday morning. We had summer workouts also, which, weren't fun because you want to go and do summer things. But I grew to love it. So I wouldn't say like anything I hated. Maybe the long distance ones, every so often he'd throw, an extra one in and say, well, instead of doing, 2 miles today, we're doing 3, or we're going to do hills today. Hills were never my favorite.
Right.
We would do those on occasion to build up the endurance. So
it was always interesting to see what Muzz would come up with. Remember when we started doing fartleks? I'm like, what? What are we doing?
The half-mile repeats.
And just all the different strategies and mixing up the long distance with the short sprints and the hill workouts.
The wind sprints.
The wind sprints. Just
on the track
the
and
different things. And
Single file.
Single file. That was always interesting.
yes.
You felt like you were floating as you were running, and you're like, okay, there's some people I got to get past. But I mean, we just pretty much did what he said, and it was always interesting. And so it was
he
something
really
new.
did a great job of breaking it up. And
there was a strategy to his training. We find that out, you figure it out later on. But there was a reason why we ran certain ones on certain days, and it actually improved us. And, as the years go on, we did, get better, obviously, by the records we held. But you put it all together after you look back and say, oh, well, that's why we did it. That's, and it all made sense at the time. And we're like, oh, you weren't a happy camper about some of the training, but then it made sense when we faced the meet. We're like, oh, this is all woods, that's why we ran this way, or this one's all hills, that's why we practiced the softball hill this week. And he really put a lot of thought into our training.
Right. Now, Coach, did you have anybody helping you at the time, or was it pretty much just you in the beginning?
Not at the beginning. In a few years later, we did. Jeff Heitman helped out a little bit. Stu Green. Yeah. And then towards the end of my coaching tenure, Matt Bradshaw. So, we did later on, but not the first couple of years, no.
Right. Did you feel like that was difficult, being the only coach? I mean, would you have liked an assistant at the time?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. But it was to get the program started was significant. So I didn't want to go and ask for more than I knew they were going to be supportive of, especially early on. Right.
Now, you said you had 3 meets that year in '87.
Correct.
Now, did it take a while to get that first meet, though? I mean, were you practicing for a few weeks before you finally got one? Or?
We did. The first meet, I think, was October 2nd, which was basically in our mid-season.
Right.
And it was a
the
home
season ends by Halloween, correct?
Pretty much, unless you make to the state open. Yeah.
Right.
So we did. We had a home meet. It was the only time we ran a 2.1 mile home course. From after that, we went to the 3.1, which was a much tougher course. But we did, and we ran against Lyman Hall and Housatonic Valley Regional.
Right.
We got beat. as I would have expected. But it was a good experience, and we saw, I saw some things. I mean, everybody finished, number one. Sharon Miller had a pretty good race, and I'll never forget, Sharon and Sherry were like first and second after about a quarter of a mile.
Yep.
Right.
And I'm watching this from the back, and I'm thinking, oh, wait till what they're going to be in for in the second half of this race. But it was a learning experience, and they fell back, but they still did fairly well considering it was all new. They still did pretty well, and I saw something there. It was a sign of some optimism that maybe we could have a couple of other races, which we did.
Right, and if I'm not mistaken, which is kind of, considering you only had 3 meets, Sharon Miller was second team All-Hoosie that year, correct?
Yes.
So, I mean, the fact that in your first year, a new team, I always felt like there was a bias against Derby anyway, where sometimes kids should have made All-League and they didn't. So that was pretty cool that in the first year you had somebody, get second team.
Yeah, I mean, it was a little bit of a surprise, we didn't know what was going to happen. That was the last meet of the year for us, and it was over the 3.1 mile course. It was the first time that they had ever raced over that course. Now, for those who aren't familiar with that course, it basically includes the softball hill, which was the hill from the softball field up to the high school.
Right.
That's about the halfway mark after going down Coon Hollow Road and coming up the Library Hill to the track. The second loop was similar. You go down Coon Hollow, but you come up Nutmeg for the finish. And we finished out in the parking lot. That's a tough course for the boys. For the girls, it was almost unheard of because most of the girls' courses back then were 2.4, 2.5. To run 3.1, and with all the hills that we had, let's just say it had a psychological impact on the other teams.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Yep.
So, Lauren, let me ask you this. You're a 15-year-old kid at the time, so it's hard to say if you were nervous or not because you're young, but were you nervous that first meet that you were doing? I mean, did you have any butterflies, or were you just ready to go?
I have to say, the first meet I don't remember as much. I've been thinking about some of those first meets. It's the second meet, if I'm correct, the New Haven County.
Yep.
Because that was more interesting because you really were pretty much running in the woods at times. And what happened, I actually ended up befriending someone while I was running, and she got me through like the whole course. To me, I have a memory of it, and it's kind of like what cross country is all about. It's an individual sport, but yet there's people, even from other teams, who are kind of there to cheer you on and help you out because it is such an individualized, personalized sport. You need a lot of persistence to do it. So my memories more so are from that meet. I guess I wasn't afraid for the first one because I don't remember feeling afraid, but I'm sure with all the preparation that Muzz gave us, I mean, I'm sure we were afraid at one point, but it was more so like an adventure is what I probably would think. Otherwise, because I don't have any feelings of being afraid from the first time.
And just to add to that, Mike, what Lauren said, the New Haven County meet that year, the boys had just run their race, and 6 of our 7 boys fell, and some of them got trampled on in the first 200 yards of that race. Now that almost never happens to the degree that it happened in that meet in cross country. 6 of our 7 went down. A couple of them, I spent a few hours in the emergency room that night. After the meet, we took them down because they were not only bloodied up, but they had rocks in their knee, and it was crazy.
Right.
The other concern that we had outside of their safety, of course, was, I'm thinking in the back of my mind, how are these girls, I mean, they're watching this for the first time. It's only their second race, and they're seeing the boys team go down and get injured and bloodied.
Right.
I'm thinking they're never going to want to run again. This could have a major impact. But they were undeterred. I mean, that did not stop them.
Right. Now, Sherry, let me ask you this. As a pitcher, you have to be mentally prepared. You want to make sure you throw the right pitch. So you're always thinking when you're on the mound. What's the difference between being a pitcher and then running a race? How do you get your mindset for that?
Well, so literally that first race that Mose was talking about, when Sharon and I were like in the first, like we were way up in the front. That day, like, still stays with me because I remember being so completely out of breath and out of, by the first half of the race, I was like, I don't know how I'm going to finish.
Right.
I went out like crazy, and I'm like, oh, this is easy. And then all of a sudden, I was like sucking wind, and all these people start passing me, and I was like, it took all I could to finish. And so what I learned from that race has literally stuck with me for the rest of my life. Honest to God.
Yeah.
From that race, I learned from the next races, I learned literally the term slow and steady wins the race. That has stuck with me in my head even to this day.
Right.
And so to prepare for the races, you prepare yourself mentally for softball, or you have a mindset of imagining the pitch and where the ball's going to go, and that's how I prepared myself for pitching. For running, it was controlled breathing. It was not worrying if you're running out and then people are passing you in the beginning, because they could have been making the same mistake I made in the beginning.
Right.
And so I learned how to be a smarter runner and think it through. I had no idea that running required much thought until those 3.1 mile races. So, and literally I have 4 kids. They're all teens, and they all have their own sports and their own things that they do, and I keep, to this day, I say slow and steady wins the race. Just stick with it.
Right.
It's kind of crazy how, honest to God, you don't realize like where you're, full circle, where it comes from. Yeah.
The difference between running and the other sports is you don't know how your legs are going to be day in and day out. You could have a great workout one day, and then you're like, this is a great workout, I'm going to do great. And then the next day you have nothing. So how hard is it to keep your legs, to cooperate the way you want them to? Because I'm telling you, I deal with it when I go to the gym all the time, and it's like you want to cry sometimes when you're jogging. So how do you, deal with something like that when you feel like your legs have nothing that day?
It's funny, I never really had an issue with my, feeling fatigued in my legs other than doing like softball hill or the sprint thing. It was more my breathing.
Yeah.
That was more my issue that I had with controlling my breathing and staying calm. And, Muzz has memories of me hyperventilating after, like, I don't even know if it was like 2 weeks and I thought I had asthma. I don't know what happened to me, but I just remember that was my challenge. I never really felt like my legs were weak. It was more my breathing.
Right.
Honest to God, like that, I would come back from that warm up of like almost 2 miles and I'd be like sucking wind, and I just never, that was my bigger challenge, I think.
Yeah.
I don't know about you, but were your legs tired?
I mean, I don't think I thought about my legs being tired. I think there was definitely a lot of icy hot though, and you used to give us some menthol, like orange
There
stuff.
was Atomic Bomb and Red Hot.
God, that's right.
That's what I remember, is that we smelled nasty once we were hurting. He would give us stuff to put on our sore muscles, and it didn't smell really good. But
I had knee issues though, didn't I?
Yes.
Yeah, that's right.
Especially your junior year.
My junior year, that's right. I had knee issues.
I would get shin splints at the beginning of the season, but then, as the years progress, you learn how to deal with that. But I always had an issue, and I still do to this day, where my legs are almost like somebody else's legs, because my feet start going numb from my toes all the way up to my knees, and I can't feel my feet or my legs. And sometimes it's a good thing when you're running and you get the long distance, you can't feel it, but you have to be careful afterwards. But it's always a weird thing. I still can't figure out to this day. I must be cutting off circulation somewhere. But it's interesting. I've always had to deal with that, and I just keep pushing myself. It's a mental thing. You just keep pushing yourself. You learn to just find any strategy to get through it.
Yeah.
And I had the breathing, I had the legs, and it's like, okay, you can do it, you can do it. And it's like, visualizing that next step and,
Yeah.
Right.
preparing for the hill. And
Right.
like, I remember one of the hills, I can't remember who I was with. We pulled one of those sandwich moves on Nutmeg. And we, got together and we sprinted around the person, and you definitely saw the effect. They were like, oh, like it just stopped them in their path, and we just sprinted up and right to the finish line. I can't remember who I was with.
Those little psychological techniques.
Yeah, so
Right.
you kind of you just push yourself through it. In life, there's always
Yeah.
challenges, and
Right.
you learn to push yourself through the tough times.
Right. Now, Coach, let me ask you, how did you evaluate these 7 girls the first year? Were you pleased with what you saw, and did you think that this program was going to make it?
Yeah, I mean, to the point where if I wasn't, I wouldn't have proposed having a girls' team the next year. But
Right.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, in a short period of time, listen, they managed to overcome some hurdles. They had the first race jitters and dealing
Right.
with all of that. Watching the boys' team in their second race all go down and bleeding and all of that stuff, and then the third race taking on our home course, which was unbelievable. So that impressed me, and I saw some talent there. We weren't anywhere near where we would be later, but we saw some potential, and that's why we went forward with the following year.
Right, and it was a new program. Let me ask you, did the programs such as Amity, Sheehan, those type of programs, did they have feeder programs at a younger age for these kids? Or, I mean, because I think that's where you're at a disadvantage too, when these kids have been running for so many years.
Absolutely. I mean, Cheshire did with Dodd Junior High School. They had a program, they had a good
Right.
program. Amity, I believe, did as well.
Right.
Yep.
Amity was always a good program. One of the
Absolutely.
best.
Amity and
Yeah.
Cheshire were dominant
Right.
in the Hoosie for year after year. And even among the top Class S teams, Mike, teams like Lyman Memorial and Litchfield, they were usually 1-2 in the years that they ran. And they both had middle school programs. Litchfield started running in 5th grade.
Right, yep.
So, we were, to accomplish what we did was pretty amazing. We didn't have any of that.
Right.
Yeah.
And this is a Class S school going against a lot of Class L teams, double L teams. So, I mean, I think in a way, too, that made them better because they were going against the best of the best week in and week out.
Sure, absolutely. That helped us, especially when we got to the state meet. Having run against tough competition during the year, now you finally get a chance to compete against schools your own size. And we managed in those years, 88, 89, and 90, not only to peak in the Class S championship meet, but I did a little evaluation about a year ago comparing with...
Really?
Yeah, it was surprising. I would never get into statistics, but I looked at, among the Class S schools, where we were at the beginning of the season at Wyndham and where we were at the end, and compared them with the other schools. And in those 3 years, among the teams that ran both races, of course, we ended up being the most improved team based on percentage of improvement with time.
Right. And talk about the 1988 team. You went from 7 runners to 15, if I'm not mistaken.
Correct.
And the girls would get their first win, and they would do it against a coach who had a legacy in Derby, and Coach Jimmy Keefe, correct?
Yes,
Against
that's right.
Berlin.
Yep.
Talk about that 88 season a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, the 88 season was obviously all new. I was a nervous wreck the night before that Berlin meet because it was our very first race. But this was a team that made tremendous strides from the beginning of the season to the end.
Right.
It was still very new. In fact, after a week, Joe Borzelli came up to me and he said, girls are telling me you're killing them in practice. I mean, and if you know how Joe would say that, anyway, very bluntly. And I was like, well, yeah, okay. But it was a balancing act in that first year, Mike, because on one hand, we couldn't push them too much, because if we did, they weren't ready.
Right.
They'd be more likely to be injured, and then we might lose people. So I couldn't go full force. At the same time, we had to push enough where we had some degree of success early on,
Right.
To keep the interest going. So it was that sort of tight wire.
But the funny thing is, you talk about you couldn't push them that much, but I think people don't realize too. The age difference, it wasn't that much between you and those girls. I think you were, 23 years old when you got the job?
Yeah.
Which is unheard of for somebody at 23. So, I mean, you were young, and when you're young at that, 23 like that, yes, you're an adult, but you're still very much a kid. So you do make mistakes too. So I think it was important that you didn't push them, because at a young age like that, you most certainly could have overdid it with them.
Very easily. And I think with the reputation that I had with the boys team in terms of pushing them, I think there was sort of like, well, what's he going to do? Is he going to kill the girls now? And so, no, I mean, I did realize that early on. You can't just go in and do that. So, but you're right. No, it was, I was very young and energetic at the time.
And when you're young like that too, again, you kind of, like I said, you go overboard because you think, oh, I need to push them, do it. This is the only way we're going to be successful. So it could have definitely backfired if you went that route too.
Yeah, it would have. Yeah, I think it would have. Yeah, you have to be careful.
Right.
But that team, now Sharon Miller, of course, would end up. She had an unbelievable year. It was really her one full season.
Right.
And she managed on an individual level to come in 10th in Class S, which at the time was all Class S.
Right.
She was second team All Hoosier, All Valley. In a very short period of time, she did very, very well. But we also did well as a team. Now, we were 5-9 that year, Mike, which may not sound like a lot. But remember, this is a whole new experience, really. And so...
But be honest, I don't think you expected to win that many meets, correct?
I didn't know. I knew we wouldn't have a winning season, certainly, in the first year. I was hoping that we would at least get a couple of wins, and that by the end of the season we would be respectable and make an improvement in the Class S meet.
Right.
Which we did. We ended up 7th in our first year. We beat more than half the teams in our class, and you could see the improvement that we had in that year. And by the way, one other thing I do remember after that first race against Jim Keefe, and that was a great experience. It was a good way to sort of start the program, with somebody who had such a great reputation in Derby. But I remember, and I don't know who around this table was responsible for this, but I got doused with the Gatorade bucket after the first race. Now, it was only water, fortunately. It wasn't Gatorade, but yeah, that was... Sure, I should have known. But no, it was a good year. It was a lot of fun.
So Kelly, let me ask you this. When I had Maria Conlon on, I would ask her about Gino Auriemma, and she would say how he drove her nuts. She used to, go home and want to throw darts at him and stuff because she couldn't take her. Let me ask you this, because you're young kids. Were there ever times you went home and you're like, Mom, I can't stand this guy Muzz. He's driving me crazy. Be truthful. It's 31 years now. So.
We can still do Hill Scout.
I don't think so, to be honest. I mean, I don't remember ever. I think that's just the way I was always brought, though. Because elders and respect. I don't. Not that I never realized you were that young actually until such your age. I always thought, I was like even a coach, and I don't think. I mean, other sports might be a different story, suicides and everything else when you do other sports. But I can honestly say I don't remember going, oh my God, I can't stand.
But I bet all that running helped you girls condition-wise in your other sports. Like when you're doing suicides and stuff, you're like, this is nothing. I ran 8 miles every day. So I mean, it definitely had to play a part.
It paid off. You found you were going faster on the bases. You found because you would sprint the last part of the race, so pick up speed, you'd pace yourself, and then like, okay, you see the finish line, you pick up speed. So I found it did help in other sports. It's like, wow, I can actually run up and down the basketball court.
Sure, you
without losing
smiled
my
at
breath.
Coach. Sure, you smiled at Coach Borzelli. Said, "Is this all you got?"
Yeah. I smiled quite.
No,
My
honestly,
tongue.
it was so hard. Like, Muzz is just so passionate and enthusiastic about cross country. Like,
That it
no,
makes you
I
wanna be,
never
yeah.
questioned anything that he proposed, and he was still caring. He didn't push us like mean or harsh or like we knew that there was a reason, and he was really caring too. So he was a great girls cross country coach.
Right.
I mean, you can make me cry, Muzz, but really, I never had any negative feelings towards it.
Right.
If anything, he made me stick with it and push myself, and it was great. Like
Right.
it was one of the greatest experiences. You did a great job.
Right, and I think the proof.
Yeah.
I think the proof is the fact that you kept coming back every year.
Yeah.
Because if you hated it, whether Coach Borzelli wanted you or not, you're not going to do it if you don't like it. And the fact that every year you returned, and in a lot of ways, I'm sure maybe it started out as just like an extra sport for you, but it's probably right up there with your other sports, correct?
I can comment on that. I think the first year we were preparing for basketball, but then as the years went on in our first official year, it was yet another sport that we were doing that we were all serious about and had
Right.
the same, if not more, because it was so much running. And in the summer running, we had our own goals and determination, and we took it very seriously. And we knew that we were, the first team for the school, and we wanted to do well for ourselves and for Muzz. Muzz has put so much energy into the program. He used to, I was thinking of something, I remember going in the classrooms, and he used to like prep us for the meet the day before and tell us to eat pasta, and also give us every single stat from practice, so that we knew he would anticipate where we should be, like every nook and cranny of every race, and he prepared us to a T that I think he could challenge any professional football coach today with the stats without the internet. So I guess what I'm saying is we all became that for cross country.
Right.
That it became who we were, and it was another sport for us to want to all excel at together and individually.
Right.
It made us want it, and it was very inspiring, and going to that and listening, and just his encouragement. Oh yeah, and if we do this and this, and if you place here and you place here, and if you and oh, we could probably beat them, and it was just the passion was there, and it was just
Right.
it was addictive. Like it really.
It's very positive. There's a lot of positiveness.
Yeah.
And I think that's what a lot of positiveness. It was always the chance for something to happen. It wasn't that well, you can't do that. It was always like the world was our oyster, and he
Right.
prepped us to do our best, and we thought we can do it every time because of him.
Right.
Well, I got to say, Mike, that one of the characteristics of the team, especially in those years, was, they may not have had a lot of running experience. They didn't have a lot of mileage behind them at that point.
Right.
But what they had, and it became particularly evident in '88, and then especially in the future seasons, '89 and '90, they had a fierce competitiveness within them. And none of this would have been possible if you had people that just went through the motions, and
Right.
were just there to, bide their time. They wanted to win. They had that before they started running cross country. They probably developed that playing youth sports, and they all played together.
Oh, yeah.
They were sort of an entity, and they had that. So we were able to compensate for the lack of experience with that work ethic and that competitiveness, that drive that they had.
Right. When I talk to one of Ron Carbone. He used to coach Derby football back in the 60s. And I talked to one of his players, and he told me at the time, they would always say, God, Coach Carbone's pushing us too much. He's working us way too hard. But he said when they would play in the games would be so much fun because they worked so hard in practice, the games were almost easy. So let me ask you, and any one of you could answer this, would you say because the practices were so tough and hard that when you were doing the meets, you found them to be a lot easier because you were so trained and you were so conditioned?
Oh yeah, we were prepared.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I would say that every practice was very thought out and very specific for the race that we were going to be racing. So it was, we were very, very prepared. Almost as if we had run the race like in bits and pieces through the week, and then once you got to the race, it like pulled it all together.
Right.
It really did. It was really... He's a very smart coach, really.
People don't realize this too, and I know you're going to say this is no big deal, but when you're 15, 16, and 17-year-old kids, and you're running for 2 hours every day like that, you do hit a wall, and when you get home, you still have homework to do, you still have to eat dinner, study, whatever it might be, you have a social life, and I'm sure there are times you wanted to go home and just fall asleep. So you're giving a lot of time to this program, and I think sometimes people don't realize what kids do in general when they're participating in sports, because they do give up a lot of their time, because you know what, when you're at that age, you want to be with your girlfriend, your boyfriend, whatever it might be, you want to go to the mall, you give up a lot to be a part of a team.
I think so. I mean, but back then for myself, that was my whole life. Like, sports was my outlet. So, I remember being after school and running cross country, and then pitching with his dad with Coach Mars for hours because you could. It was amazing. I mean, it was just, I loved it. I just loved sports. So the morning practices and the summer and the weekends, that was hard. But when you have that mind, the sports mind, then it wasn't so bad for me personally.
Now, you talked about how you always tell your kids, pace yourself and all this stuff. But would you say that the lessons you learned from, Coach Muzz, Coach Borzelli, whoever, that those are the same lessons you kind of give to your kids, that when they're saying it's too hard or stuff like that, you're telling them, no,
Absolutely.
you could do it?
100%.
Right.
Yeah.
Would you agree too, Kelly?
I do. I was listening because I have kids that play sports too, and Muzz never yelled, screamed, and everything. And I noticed that, and that's the whole thing I say. I'm like, when you scream at children and playing sports, it goes in one ear and out the other. Muzz was very loving. Like, he didn't, if you're hurt, okay, take it easy. I don't want you to get hurt, or injure yourself. And I think just his whole outlook on everything made it such a positive, and that's where you take it in, because different coaches have different techniques, and I think different people respond to different training, and you take in more and you learn more, and you want to improve and you want to do well, and set everything.
I personally think the psychological aspect of any sport and how you approach whatever sport you're participating in, that is going to determine how well you do. The way you think and the way your attitude is going to completely drive your performance. And that's with everything that you do. So I very, very specifically teach my kids that. Well, how you think and your attitude is going to determine your success. And if you think you're not going to succeed, then you're not going to succeed. But if you put your mind to it, you could do just about anything. So all those lessons have stuck with me. And I teach nursing students now. It's the same thing. There's days where they feel they can't, oh my gosh, it's so hard. I'm like, well, if you keep complaining about it, then you're going to have trouble, but spend your time working on the solution versus, worrying about things all the time. So all those lessons have stuck.
Right. Now, Lauren, let me ask you, one of the things, too, that I think is good about cross country, and I think it falls in the same category with track, too, is friendships are really made in those sports because there's long bus rides sometimes. And it's also a sport too, though, where like, you could kind of relax a little more on the bus rides than say, if you're playing a basketball game or a football game, and you really bond with each other. Would you say that was the good thing about cross country too, is the friendships you made?
Yeah, I mean, even if it's the type of thing where even if you don't see each other for a while, the memories are there. Like when we all got back together about a year and a half ago for the tournament, for the banquet, for the state championship.
Right.
It's those deep structured foundations that helped all of us get through. I don't want to say get through. That helped all of us through all the sports that we did and all the challenges and the homework and social things at school and things like that. We were like a pack of kids that we were in each other's lives, every day, for everything. So it's just such a strong foundation in high school that you can't take it away. And absolutely, I mean, those bonds are there regardless of freshman, sophomore, junior, senior. It's just one big family.
Right.
Yeah. And a lot of us grew up, like Lauren and Kelly and I and Sharon and Shelly and Holly all grew up in the same neighborhood. So we grew up playing with each other and we're friends from the time we were little.
Yeah.
So we were playing sports from the time we could start playing sports. Like you said, we were all competitive.
Yeah.
And then those bus rides just added to it and brought other people in, and they were fun. I loved the bus trips to the big meets, and we'd go out to the diner beforehand. And oh my God, those are so much fun. Those are like, they had blankets and pillows
There's some early mornings on Saturdays.
Yeah, it was still dark out.
Yeah.
Now, when you look at it like 30 years later now, and you see that Derby has this run-in program that basically starts at age, 7 months? Somewhere around there?
Yeah,
7 or 8
in
years.
Bradley School,
Yeah.
5th grade, I think.
Yeah, so that was never there for you, and it's really nobody's fault. It's just the time back then. But is it amazing to you to see that, like, how big this run-in has become? I mean, and basically it all started in 1987, and now it's evolved in 2018. Like, it's off the charts.
It is. I follow, like you said, and we were talking before on Facebook, I follow Derby Cross Country, Derby Middle School Cross Country.
Right.
Jen, I met her at the banquet. I follow, her. She's over at Bradley School. So I love it. I'm so odd. I'm like, I wish we had the opportunity. We didn't. But I just love seeing the progress of the runners, the younger ones. They have their own team, a great coaching system behind them. And to see, I can't wait to see what they're going to become by high school. If they, most of them will stay with it. You can see the determination. I see on Facebook they're running, races on their own, 3.1. And it's just amazing that it's such a young generation that wants to succeed in this sport. And the sport is still alive.
Right. And Muzz, I mean, you've been around it the last 5 years now again. I mean, it must be a lot of fun to be back there. But you have to smile, too, when you see what these girls and boys are doing and realize what these girls started for you all those years, prior.
Absolutely. I mean, and not only that, but, when Lauren was talking about the Class S banquet, I had asked the 4 young ladies on the stage here today if they would be willing to go to the banquet and congratulate the 2016 cross-country team for winning the Class S championship. And not only were they willing to do it, but they were excited about it. And I think that goes to their character and seeing what's happened and how good they've become. And it was a great moment that night. I mean, sort of blending the old and the new together, after all these years. But absolutely, and the program now is phenomenal. It's great to be around. The kids are great. And sometimes I see things in some of those kids that remind me of some of the characteristics and stuff that they did. And so I'm in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, oh yeah, that's what's and so you make those connections too. But no, it's great. And the coaching staff, Nick DeLugo at the high school, and then the middle school coaches. It's just good stuff.
Right. Well, we heard all about how the program got started. In part 2, we'll hear about how it took off. For Hometown Heroes, I'm Mike Kenichi saying good night, everyone.